Hello, I'm Stuart Bowes, and you're watching or listening to the Net Hero podcast. This is a podcast for you if you care about what we're doing to the planet. You don't have to be an eco-warrior. We believe business is the solution to making things better. But we're for people who want to make that difference by either cutting their emissions or coming up with ideas that can help us do things a bit better. We've featured politicians, academics, lots and lots of business people, entrepreneurs, inventors, and of course people who are just interested in doing the right thing. So sit back, listen and enjoy, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Please share it with your friends and colleagues, and you can always check out our two websites that cover all of this: Energy Live News and futurenetzero.com. This podcast is purely editorial, so sit back and enjoy this week's episode. Well, we've had a power outage in Spain. We've had Tony Blair saying net zero's going the wrong way. We've had the Tory party who set up the net zero target pushing back. And we've had the Climate Change Committee in recent weeks, all of this saying that we're not moving fast enough. At the same time that Labour has set out its stall for its big vision for a clean grid by 2030, many ask the fundamental question: with more and more renewables coming online, how can we make sure that we've actually got the power when we need it? And that means having more storage. Do we have enough? Are we doing the right things? And where are we now that many politicians and many major energy companies seem to be not rowing back completely on net zero, but definitely having another think? Well, I'm joined today by a man who knows so much about this. He's got a view above the water, below the water. He's been the sort of submarine commander of the energy seas for many years. Robert Groves, the CEO of Smartest Energy. Hey, Robert, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I didn't recognize anyone from that introduction, but I'm very pleased to be here nevertheless.
It's a little in joke because I've known Robert for many years, and he was a very good member of Her Majesty's forces serving under the seas. Is that right? But we'll keep that quiet.
Let's keep that quiet, yes. A long, long time ago.
A long, long time ago. What have you made of all the things that have happened the last couple of weeks, really, last few weeks? So we've had, obviously, Kemi Badenoch saying that the Tories wouldn't sign up to the 2050 target. We've had rowbacks across the Atlantic, obviously, with Trump. We've had the power cut in Spain. We've had Tony Blair saying it's not going the right way because you're going to cost consumers too much. And then you've had reports from institutions and various bodies saying we're not going the right pathway to do what we want to do by 2050. And one of the major stumbling blocks is our grid and the lack of support. So looking at it all, is net zero in trouble in your view?
Okay, well, we're doing this at just the wrong time for an easy answer, aren't we, really? Look, but if we work on the basis that the science is still the right science, and that we sooner or later have to, it's just a question of how we do it and how quickly we do it. Now, I think the consequences of the current approach of net zero targets by 2050 or wherever they might be, using science-based targets as the metric for whether you've done that, whichever way you do it, it's going to be expensive. And I think we're starting to understand that. We're also starting to understand it's complex, and the way we've done things in the past won't work anymore, as we're starting to see, perhaps through when we find out what happened in Spain, but more usefully, what's happening in markets that are further down this journey, such as perhaps Australia, which is a great laboratory for what happens when a grid that's not quite ready for it meets the energy transition head on. So from my perspective and my view and my company's view, I think we're still going down the right pathway, but we're having a more well-considered thought process now about the current direction of travel.
I think that's a fair point. I think a lot of it, I don't know whether you disagree or agree, it seemed to be from, if you look at 2019 when, Theresa May put the target in, and then you had the build-up, obviously you had COVID that sort of knocked it. But in a way, COVID also focused minds because we had quiet peace, and everyone's like, wow, wouldn't it be great if the world was not polluted and net zero, this is the way. You had a plethora of governments and institutions committing to targets, right? Everyone was saying, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be cutting that. And then I think whether Ukraine had a massive, which it did economically, but lots of other factors, we've all just woken up saying, that's a great ambition, but flipping heck, the cost is huge. And is that something we just ignored? Was this driven by kind of enthusiasm and dogma rather than practical thinking? Because this is the biggest change since we had electrification.
It's a big global energy revolution, and we shouldn't underestimate the challenge. Look, I think all the reasons why we decided to go down this journey in the first place still stand true if we believe in the science.
Yeah,
And if you don't believe in the science, can you really take the risk that the science might be right, and you've decided not to take any action? And I think the prudent answer to that is no, you can't. So globally, if you buy into that strategy, we have to do something. Now, it was always going to be expensive, but don't forget that the marginal unit cost of renewable energy is zero. It also, a transition to renewables from hydrocarbon reduces your exposure to all the geopolitics that goes with hydrocarbon supply. So there are real benefits to having a renewable driven generation mix and grid. It, however, needs us to behave differently. Grids have
yes,
to be smarter. They
yeah,
have to have more flexibility because with that renewable generation goes intermittency. Intermittency means we have to be very, very flexible. We have to be entrepreneurial from a grid perspective as to how you manage that risk. And that means new technologies such as batteries, demand side, response, all of the portfolio of tools that you need to be able to manage that sort of complexity.
the recent fire that there was at Heathrow, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then obviously the Spain blackout. These have been two very big things that have shown us just how quickly things can fall apart when power goes. And
Mm.
do you think that has also focused minds? Because, I can't think of, I remember there was a massive outage in America about maybe 8, 9 years ago. I can't remember. But these have been two massive events, both partially, it's not been proven, but blamed on, you know, biomass or renewables, or you can spin it any way you want, right? And no one knows, and the investigations are still going, but they show that how quickly things can fall apart once power goes. And as we become more interconnected, AI, the way we work from home, all of this, do you think this is brought to fruition now? Government thinking, whoa, 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 the grid as we transition is very vulnerable.
Well, look, in any complex journey, there's always going to be a few hiccups on the way, isn't there? And we've been very comfortable in a hydrocarbon
Yeah, of course.
legacy environment with a low risk system to operate. And with an energy transition, there's got to be also a cultural transition in our understanding of how we manage that complexity. And not everyone's going to do it perfectly. There will be mistakes, there will be hiccups, both at a national level, i.e., grid level, and then locally with companies. And I think we saw both of those, perhaps with the Spanish grid and then with the Heathrow
Yeah,
blackout. But look, we know what we have to do. We know what the tools are that are available to us. What we really need here is okay, political leadership, because the politics always leads the economics.
yeah,
Once we've got that, we need industry regulation to set the direction of travel for grid operators and to prioritize them. And then we just need to get on with it. And I think in some markets, we're doing that very well. Other markets, well, the political message might be slower to respond or moving the other way. And they're perhaps less keen to go down that way. And I've mentioned already America and the effect of Trump. But I think in the UK, we're having a valid debate about it, but I don't think that's going to change the overall ambition of where we want to get to in the end.
is affordability and transition mutually compatible? Because I kind of get the feeling that everyone's waking up to say, well, we got the maths wrong. This is really going to cost us, all of us, a lot more than we thought.
I don't necessarily buy into the idea that a renewable future is a more expensive future. Okay. If you think that we're somewhere between halfway down that journey between being coming from where we were 20 years ago to where we want to be in 20 years' time.
Yeah,
We had the energy crisis in Europe caused by the war in Ukraine, and we saw energy prices spike to levels that no one had ever seen before. And the end cost of that was borne by business consumers and residential consumers. The way to avoid that sort of risk, that external price shock, is to have an independent power supply that's immune to those geopolitical risks. And having a renewable energy portfolio where your grid is largely renewable driven, with all of the safety factors underneath it, storage, flexibility, demand side response, ultimately is going to be a lower cost,
right.
less volatile price environment for consumers to live in. So I don't buy into the fact that it's unaffordable or that it's going to be more expensive. I just think there's a little bit of uncertainty, and that's making people nervous.
Yeah. I mean, the EV is the example, isn't it? Everyone was like, EVs are the way. Apps was, it's going to be brilliant. Everyone's, let's get a Tesla, although some people don't like Teslas anymore for political reasons. All of that stuff. And then you have government setting targets. They move back, they go backwards, they go forward, they go whatever. And then you suddenly find the consumers initially a lot of excitement, but then the reality is that it seems to be, dare I say, just for the people who are nice, middle class, and wealthy, and generally in business. So there's been a backstep. Do you think? Are you trying to say that all of these things they're just a natural path of this kind of up and down that we'll get to as you move along to a greener future?
Yes, I am, because my glass is always half full, not half empty. And I'm a believer that technology is going to get better and better. So let me give you an example. You talked about batteries.
Yeah,
So we joked a little bit about what I used to do before I went into this business, and I was a submariner, and I used to operate a battery on a submarine. And the battery cells I used to operate were lead acid batteries, each about 2 meters tall and a quarter of a ton. Now, look at the technology we're dealing with now in terms of battery technology, solid state battery technology, and the energy intensity we're getting from that. So, technology is leading the way. And technology is enabling us to think of new solutions that, as they are introduced, commercialized, they become more commercial, more affordable. And we're on that trajectory. So I think technology will save us. Technology will enable the solution. It's just a question of commercializing that technology and making sure clearly you pick the right one.
for people who don't know about Smart, it's probably a good time to explain what Smarters does. It's been around for I think about 25 years, something like that, near enough.
Yes.
What is your sort of raison d'etre, and where do you operate, and what is it that makes you different as a company?
Well, thank you. I love talking about smartest energy. I've been here
This is
now
your
for
little
about
bit.
20,
This is your
just
little
a little
bit. Your
bit.
free minutes.
I've been constraining and holding back the entire 10 minutes of this call. But well, Smartest Energy, we were formed in 2002 as a generation aggregator and trader in the UK, which meant that we bought the power produced by other people's power stations
Yeah,
and we traded it. Well, since then, we've built up a supply business and we are now a major, well established B2B supplier in the UK. So, our core business in the UK today is a vertically integrated electricity company, but we don't own any of our own generation assets. We're completely dependent on the market and other people's generation assets. Um, Most recently, we've now grown that business overseas. We've now replicated the smartest energy business platform in the States and also in Australia. So today we globally employ about 850 people and we deliver a sort of profit of about £100 million profit after tax a year. And we're very excited about the global opportunity for us to export this business model, this IP overseas. So we're looking to enter the Japanese market. We're about to sign a JV there. Japan's a great opportunity, world's fourth largest economy, largest liberalizing electricity market, great place for us to be. We're also starting to commit to new deals. We've just entered into a very large battery deal in Australia, which helps us manage the sort of risks that we've been talking about in Spain and with the fire and the blackout at Gatwick, flexibility.
Yeah.
So we've grown very quickly, and we're looking forward to a very exciting future.
But in a way, you are the people that sort of, a bit like octopus. You sit there in the middle, right? You're getting the customers, you're helping them out, and doing all of that. But people would say, well, you're not taking the risk of actually generating the stuff. And that's where the big cost is, right? Building a nuclear power station, building wind turbines, building battery farms, building the solar. So is this where the fundamental problems are? Because you can offer good value to the consumer, but you're not having to the risk of actually owning any of the generation assets. And that is where the ultimate issue with this transition is. You've got to build the stuff, haven't you?
Well, that's very true. We're not sort of everywhere, but you're right. We don't own any generation assets
Yeah,
because that's not what we're very good at. So
no,
we
I
let
get it.
people who are good at it do it. So then to follow up,
What I'm saying, the criticism is, yeah, you're doing fine, Rob. No worries, because you're not having to risk in the technology and the time lag and all of that to build the power that you
hmm,
then trade.
well, I can't argue with that. And my only answer to that would be that, well, certain technologies are expensive. There's no doubt about it, and they're therefore not commercial. And
Mm.
so that's why we need political leadership because that can provide the tariff subsidy, the incentive that allows a newly emerging technology to become commercial. But look, we've done that. And we have now got technologies which are commercial, onshore wind,
Yeah,
solar. And solar is very exciting because of the continued economies of scope and scale it gets as its cost curve keeps coming down. So look, the generation technology that we need, that other people other than us buy and invest in, is becoming cheaper and cheaper as we get more and more deployment of it. So let's not lose sight of that, and let's not forget that.
speed is the issue here. Some will say that to do this, you need to speed up.
Hmm.
Well, speeding up means money. Others say, well, hang on, you've got to take the consumer with you.
Yeah.
You deal with businesses, and I
Hmm.
think it's probably fair to say from the businesses we talk to, again, very similar to maybe the public, there's a lot of yes, we're gusto that we're going to become net zero and we're going to invest and we're going to cut our carbon. And I think the last 18 months, maybe you've seen it, I've seen businesses row back a bit from that. What do you see as the challenges in the business energy transition right now? Because I think they're suffering from the same thing as the general public thing, which is it's a good idea, I'd like to do it, but oh, it's going to cost too much for my business.
Well, that's a great challenge, isn't it, to manage? How quickly do we do it? And what should the cost of it be? Well, look, I think we need to recognize that the energy transition is something we must do.
Yeah,
And I think we need to be realistic that we need to do it uh, at a speed that doesn't cause unnecessary damage. So we need to balance the approach here. And I think most places and people get that balance right. Now, if that's the strategic macro long-term view of how
yeah,
we do things, how do businesses or Smartest Energy's customers feel today? Well, first of all, a customer in America is very different to a customer in the UK and a customer in Australia. In Australia, we're finding our customers there, our business consumers, are committed to making to a net zero future and decarbonizing their electricity supply. In the US, we're finding there is absolutely no interest
yeah,
from a business customer to do that. So if we look at the UK, which is a good halfway house, probably a more balanced and realistic metric for us to use, I think that large businesses are leading the way in terms of their approach to wanting to decarbonize. Our biggest selling product in the UK is a traceable supply, whereby our business consumers can actually trace the provenance of the electrons.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So And we're seeing growing demand for that. We're seeing that act as a real USP for us versus our competitors. So I'm not so negative about business demand for a renewable agenda and a renewable product. I think they're as committed as ever.
Do you think that they're willing to, push that beyond their scope one and two? Because the real one is scope three, right? And
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
pressure on the supply chains. It's all very well that someone says, I'm going to, you know what, I've ticked the box. I've got green power, and Robert's confirmed that my little electrons came from a wind turbine. I'm very happy, and I've done this, and I've cut my bill. But actually, the fact that the people who supply me are using fossil fuels or importing it, no one gives a crap. And I'm not going to. I don't know. It's a very difficult one because for companies to feel the pressure of doing the whole thing, it's a lot. And the scope three, frankly, let's be honest, no one's really tackling it properly.
Scope three is pretty terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Scope one and two, that's a manageable
You have
management
control.
challenge.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
have control of
yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly. If we look at our own industry, electricity supply companies, the cost for a company such as us to achieve a reasonable net zero target by, say, 2035 or 2050 with science based targets, scope one, two, and three is prohibitively expensive.
There we go. Yeah.
So I'm completely amenable and understanding of that cost and challenge. But what I would say is we have to just be a little bit more flexible about how we define scope three. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm morally changing the direction of travel,
Yeah.
but I think we need to recognize that if you're a business, whether a consumer or producer, and you're using renewable power to supply your business, you should get the benefit of that. And you should not have to use, therefore, grid average with grid average's carbon intensity. So I think there's a way to deal with this, and I think technology and flexibility will allow us to do that.
There's a couple of things I want to talk about before we end. One is obviously the grid itself and connections. There's this other thing that Labour's done is, old Crazy Ed with his videos. Oh my God, I don't know who does his social media, but he's getting even more hilarious. He was in a coffee shop the other day. But anyway, Grid Cues was his coffee shop little skit on X or Twitter, as it's called, whatever it's called. And he was basically saying, we're going to cut the grid queues. Silly video, good, serious point. That's a big thing because people have been saying there have been blockers, and that's why costs have gone up because planning takes too long. Materials for creating these kind of renewable assets are getting blocked and you can't connect to them. That's the first thing I want to discuss with you. See, that's still a big issue. And the second thing is going sort of back to the beginning of the conversation. If we are going to have more renewables, we have got nowhere near the right amount of storage to stop intermittency. And that is the biggest problem that's holding them back. So let's talk those two first. Grid queues and connections, the assets that we want to connect to. How do you see the state of it right now? And do you think that's fundamentally holding back businesses as well?
Well, yes, there's no doubt about it. But let's just take a step back and think for a second. Grid is a monopoly supplier. It's got a public sector owned legacy culture history to it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we need to think a little bit more creatively about allowing private companies into this space. We've already got a framework for private grids, haven't we? Maybe we need to be more flexible and supportive of allowing private grid operators into the market to allow them to compete against national grid. Now, we have a framework for that. Surely it wouldn't take very much to expand it a little bit more, add some competition to this.
So that's the first thing. You think it is going to need the commercialization of the grid to cut the queues? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think it would definitely shake it up a bit, and I think it needs shaking up. We're having this argument, aren't we, about locational pricing?
Correct.
Well, I mean, that's a no-brainer, really, isn't it? Because what it does is it makes sure we build it in the right place. But we used to have locational pricing, and the then Alexon and Grid leadership, let's call it, decided to take it away because it was easier to manage without it. Well, now that we've got so much independently owned, grid connected generation capacity, we need to be a little bit more flexible, have locational pricing so we can make sure it's built in the right place. Okay, so I do think we need to shake things up a bit, add a little bit of competition. And I think an easy way to do that, given what we've already got in place, is enabling private grids.
Good point. Interesting. People will say, well, that can lead to a bit more chaos in the market as well. What if these people fail? What happens then? Who picks up? Is it going to be the public that have to pick up the bill?
Yeah, of course, and I can imagine who might say that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
what we just do is we grant licenses, and the
Yeah.
license conditions with proper oversight have the qualification needed for you to operate a grid. And by doing that and by enforcing it, we make sure that they are reasonable and prudent operators.
All right. Batteries. I'll take
Yeah.
that one. I'd like that one. I'm going to pass that on to someone else and see what they think about that. Batteries. Um, cost a lot. Planning, setting them up, all of these issues. And also, as you said earlier, they've improved a lot, but there's a lot more to go for them to become the sort of, replace the standing inertia ready power stations that we use. We've still got a few, but the gas or the turnkey power that you need. Where do you think we are on that? Because again, infrastructure wise, it's one of those things that the government wants to push the button on. And just today, at the time of recording this, there's a big survey saying people, I don't want any of this stuff near me, right? Even if you pay me, I don't want to have a
Yeah.
turbine or a big battery storage system next to me. So that is a real big thing if you want more renewable power, isn't it?
It is. But look, things are getting better and they're improving, and those factors that are acting as roadblocks won't be there for very much longer. I was in Australia recently visiting a very large 400 megawatt grid scale battery,
Yeah.
and the footprint of it was very, very small. It was located in an area that they were calling a energy hub, where they were co-locating all of the assets they need for flexibility in one place. And what I saw was a an industrial asset that had a very small footprint and wasn't a eyesore. So I don't necessarily agree that they're always going to continue to blight the landscape. I think we can manage that.
But with
Cost,
respect, Rob, Australia's got a lot of space.
yeah. Yes, of course.
Someone plonks that in the middle of Tunbridge Wells, there'd be a few comments.
I'm convinced that we can manage the not in my backyard problem. Okay, so then the cost of the technology. Well, look,
Yes.
batteries are expensive. There's no doubt about it. But they're going down this global cost curve of efficiency, which means their costs are coming down all the time, and that will continue. Same for solar. Solar and batteries have a cost curve which is improving exponentially in a way that gas turbine and nuclear technology just can't keep up with or match. So they're going to get cheaper, they're going to get more affordable, they're going to get more deployable. And then finally, we're talking about batteries, but batteries aren't the only way to manage the problem.
No.
Demand side response,
Yeah.
is something that's proven. It's got low technology risk. It's got a low marginal cost to implement. It just takes political and regulatory courage to introduce it because, let's be honest, the incumbents aren't going to support the introduction of demand side response because what it does is it invalidates the investments they've made in technologies they've bet on, which are no longer in that new environment defensible or viable.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's going to be a little bit of industry resistance to it. And that's why you need that political leadership to push it through.
Let's end with that actually. So, we've just had Tony Blair saying the consumer will not tolerate paying more and more for something that feels ineffective because you do what you like to cut fossil fuels here, but it's still being burned in China, in Russia, in America, in India. It doesn't matter what it is, right? You then also have the issue of the kind of where net zero can push people into choices they don't want to make. You talked about the lifestyle changes and things like, just simple one like a car. I've got to drive at this time, or sticking in a heat pump, and can you put it on a 6-story building up in the middle of Dagenham? All of those sort of things. The Labour government have said it doesn't matter what people say, we're going to continue on our path, and in a way that's very admirable because they're trying to give certainty for all the things you said businesses need. But there is that push of the public eventually. Do you think the public have been slightly lost now and are rowing back, or do you think, because that's the fundamental, if the public are not on board, politicians get nervous and that stops the whole thing? Where do you think public attitudes are in terms of pushing forward the net zero agenda, bearing in mind these cost issues that are now really quite clear for most people?
Great question to end on. I think if you're a business or a residential consumer, then you're concerned about how much you're having to pay for your energy.
Yeah.
You have to fit it in with a lot of other things, and we're going for an economic tough time as a in the UK. So I think that's a tough call to ask those consumers, business or residential, to pay more.
Yeah.
So I think that it's reasonable to not expect them to have to do that. But my point is, they've already had to pay more with the system that we've got. Look at what happened to energy prices quite recently through the energy crisis caused by the Ukrainian war. We're exposed to global price volatility. And what I'm saying to those listeners, a renewable future is a cheaper, less volatile price environment. UK consumers already pay some of the highest electricity prices in Europe.
Certainly do, yeah.
Staying as is doesn't make sense. And transitioning to that future where we're on the renewable generation mix will be better.
Even if it may cost us a bit now, but you're saying actually you can mitigate those costs because, frankly, it's kind of as you were, really.
Well, I think we can make changes that are within our power that make it easier. Private grids to get through the bottlenecks. We can adopt technologies which are proven and commercial. Onshore wind.
Yeah.
Batteries are coming down in price. Batteries are just one way to manage intermittency. Demand side flexibility is available to us and can also. We just need a little bit more creative leadership, and then we need good regulation. And then I think, although the incumbents might squawk quite loudly, I think we'll be on the right direction of travel.
Good place to end. I feel that we've reached the time to go up Periscope and have a look at the view. Very good. Robert, always a pleasure. You're always very informed, and I thank you very much for your time because I know you're a busy man. Thank you so much for coming on the Net Hero podcast.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No problems at all. Ladies and gents, tell us what you think. Get in touch on social media. Robert's made a very good case for, even though it might be short-term pain, this is the way for us to get long-term gain. What's your view? Get in touch. Let us know. My thanks to Rob, who's doing the production this week. Remember, get in touch with us on nethero@futurenetzero.com if you'd like to appear, or if you've got a comment and share with your friends and colleagues on social media.
You've just heard the Net Hero podcast from futurenetzero.com. Join us as we help you find ways to cut your carbon footprint as we head towards net zero. Subscribe and follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.